Alright guys, Ken here from Death Venom Studios. Just wanting to go over a few things with pfSense. So we're going to go ahead and log in here. First thing you'll notice is, wow, that's a lot of information being thrown at you really quick. This is my preferred view. I can see everything that's going on with it. Interface statistics, graphs. First, I'll just show you which packages that I have installed, which are add-ins. So we'll go up here to System, and we'll go to Package Manager. So these are like little apps that you can add into pfSense. I have Nut, which adds network support for the UPC. In the future, I plan on moving my battery from being plugged in directly to pfSense to a file server that I have, and then using it over the network. pfBlocker, which if anybody's ever used pfBlock, it's exactly the same thing, but it works on your router, so your whole network's covered instead of a single PC. And then this just gives you traffic statuses or the widgets that you saw come from there. So the way you get these packages is you would click on Available Packages. If you're thinking, I want an antivirus, or I want backup software, or whatever you want, you would type in the search here and you can search for it, or you can just browse. This list used to be really long with a lot of duplicates, but with the new version of pfSense, they have fixed it. So I have, like I said, I showed you what I have on there. I did have Squid running, which is a proxy server, but the main reason I was using it was for the antivirus. It has Clam built in, which if you guys didn't know is a antivirus, and as you would download a file, it would scan it, and if it found a virus, it would prevent you from downloading it. I tested it out and I liked it a lot, but I had a problem where if I downloaded something large, say from like my Steam library, it would scan it and slow my speech from 29 megabytes to 3 megabytes, which is unacceptable. I tried playing around with the settings, but I couldn't get it to avoid those files, whether I changed the max scan size or not. And it wasn't even hitting my CPU on the router that hard. So in the future, I'll try it again, maybe when they update it, and or maybe when I learn a little bit more about it, and we'll go from there. Alright, so those are the packages you can install. Let's go back to the home screen. So now that you know where the packages come from, we can kind of go over the home screen here. So I have my thermal sensors. This is a quad core. Right here you can see it's an Intel Xeon X3330 running at 2.66 gigahertz. It's great. It never peaks out. It might be a little overkill. I particularly went with this one. I had it laying around actually. It's an old piece of hardware that I just repurposed. I did it because I knew that running the antivirus would eat up some CPU. But in all honesty, Clam, while the antivirus did increase my CPU usage, it never maxed out. It never went above, say, 30-40%. So I really don't think my CPU is the reason why my scans were being so slow. So you can also see I have memory usage. I have swap file disk usage. I'm running it off of a USB jump drive. Alright, and here you can see my battery backup, the UPS status. Then I have my firewall here. It's showing you, like right now it's showing you what's blocked. I have a bunch of things getting blocked. See this right here, that's actually 3266. That's my torrent. And I'll show you a little bit more with that. But this is just, it shows you what's being blocked. If you're having issues with a certain website or a certain software or something like that, you can kind of look on here and see if maybe for some reason it's getting blocked. Here's my running services. Just show you what's running, Nut, this is the UPS monitor. DHCP per gateway, all that good stuff. pfBlocker, I'll go over that more in detail. This is just my interface statistics. You got packets in, packets out, bytes, errors, all that good stuff. And then I have it in a graph form here so you can see what my network's currently doing for the WAN and then the LAN. If you notice, they're actually just mirror images. I only have two connections here. I have the WAN, the wide area network, and then I have the LAN, the local area network, and there's no other ports on this router. I have it going into a gigabit switch. So that's the overlay of my dashboard here, and you can see at the top here you can add more things. You can take away things. You can configure them, different settings that are particular to each plugin. You can change the, for here, for instance, you could change the update frequencies. Then you would save it. You can also move things around if you want to order them in different ways. Now I want to get into some things that I had difficulty with that eventually I was able to figure out and set up. So first thing I'll go over is, I guess, just simple port forwarding. So port forwarding in a lot of your standard like Linksys router or D-Link or Netgear, whatever you have, you literally just go to port forwarding under the firewall. In some cases it's called rules, and you just add it. There's no special anything. That's it. You just add it like you would think. I thought anyway. You would go right into here and you would just hit an add rule, and that would be the end of it for forwarding a port. It's actually more complicated than that, but at the same time it's not complicated. So the way it works, in which if you know anything, if you took any networking classes in college or have any knowledge of it, kind of makes sense when you really think about it. But you're going to actually go to NAT under firewall, which allows port forwarding. When you forward a port, you're actually doing it via NAT. That's how it translates a port to an actual address. And so if you really think about it, it makes sense. To add a port, you would click add. So we'll do that. I'm not going to save it. Then right here you can see it pretty much just fills everything out for you. So you would select the port you would want to add, say like 1063 to whatever the range is. So if you had multiple ports in the same set, but we're not, we're just going to do one port. And then the IP address on your network, whatever it is, and then the port that it's going to. This is good like if you have your port's already being used for something, so you could change the port of, like, say, a web server from 80 to whatever you wanted. So once you would enable that, you would type in your port and all your information. Again, all you really need is the port that you're forwarding to, or from the port that you're forwarding to. So if you're just doing a straight through port forward, like for a game, it would just be the same number all the way across. And then the IP address that you're sending it to. You can add a description. It doesn't actually affect anything. It's just like for your own personal, whatever, organization. And you would click save. Better practice, and for it to actually work correctly, is you actually have to type the name of the port. So if I wanted it to forward Plex, I would type in Plex. And as you can see, it automatically shows me a list when I start typing of what ports I have, so Plex. And then I would click save, and that would be the end of it. So the question is, what if you have like StarCraft? Well, if you notice, StarCraft didn't come up when I start typing. That's because you have to actually add StarCraft in. It's an extra step. It just seems like it's required in its better practices. So how do we do that? How do we get that port, that actual number port that we know our game wants to forward to, into a name or whatever you would like to call it? So we're going to go to firewall and then aliases. And then you have IP, ports, URLs, or all. IP address, that's if you have an IP and you want to give it an alias. Say like my IP is 10.10.10.66. Well, I want to call that my computer. Here I could assign that alias. So go over here to ports, and you can see I already have some set up. So you can see, like here I have my torrent protocol, I have Plex, and then I have this one called pfBlocker. And we'll go over that more whenever we get to pfBlocker. So StarCraft, and it wants a port of 1600. So we go here, we'll add an alias. So here you would type the name. This is where we would type StarCraft. Okay. You can add a description. So we'll say B gaming, and then it ports. And here you can specify what it is. We're doing ports. Just leave it at that. And here we said 1600 as an example. And then you can add a description. You can also leave this blank, but I'm going to say that this is the .NET, the BattleNet connection. Okay, and then you could hit save, and that would be the end of it. But what if you have one game that has multiple ports? For instance, let's say StarCraft also likes port 1300. And we'll say that's for the configuration. Okay. And now you have 2 ports on here. Well, let's say you have a whole string of ports. Let's say BattleNet doesn't just want 1600. It wants 1600, 1601, 1602, 1603, 1604, all the way through 1620. So the way you would do that, instead of writing each individual port, that's 20 ports, you would push a colon, and then you would put the last port that you want in this list. So 1620 was our example. So now StarCraft is recognized, or whatever app or game you use is recognized as using port 1600 through 1620, as well as port 1300. And then you would just click save, and that would be that. So if we go back to the aliases here, you can see I already have Plex and I have a torrent one. So now that we created those, we go to NAT. We go to you would add your port, and then I'm just going to click edit here. It'll bring up the menu so you can see exactly how mine looks. So you would type in our example was StarCraft, so you would type in StarCraft here instead of Plex, as well as here. The IP address that you're forwarding that port to, and then the actual target port, in other words, the port on the actual machine, which is also Plex. And then you would just click save. Now what that's going to do, it's going to create a NAT port forward. And actually, if you look here, I actually have TCP, UDP, and then here I have TCP. This should be TCP, UDP, because torrents do operate on UDP occasionally. So TCP and UDP are very similar. I don't want to call it error checking, but there's confirmation in TCP, whereas UDP, there is none. I'm not sure if Plex uses UDP or not, but there's a good chance, since it's a video playback software, that it does. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and edit this right under protocol to include TCP UDP. And then you notice that this asks me to apply changes. Any changes you make to the firewall must be applied, because what happens is once those changes are made and saved, it has to reload the firewall so that it gets the correct routing and blocking and forwarding and all that good stuff up and running. So you'll notice that these two things are now here in port forwarding. Well, the thing is that now that the NAT is forwarding it, we need to make sure that the firewall is allowing that forward to happen. Now, pfSense does this automatically. So if we go to firewall and we go to rules, that's the actual rules for the firewall itself. You can see that we already have created in here at the bottom one for torrent and one for Plex forwarding. And it even gives you under the description that it was created by the NAT. Okay. So, that being said, our rules are in here. Our ports are forward. Everything looks great. Test our ports. They work good. No problem. Now, we're going to look into pfBlocker. I know that my ISP, doesn't matter what kind of torrent traffic you have. If you are downloading Ubuntu, or you are downloading, here's a perfect example, besides just Ubuntu, but here's a really good example. StarCraft, the original game, when you download it from Blizzard, it's torrented. It has its own little torrent app, and it downloads the game via seeders and peers. My ISP immediately throttles my connection directly from Blizzard through their client, Ubuntu, or whatever. It does not matter. Any type of traffic that it detects as being a torrent, it throttles my connection. How I prevent that from happening is I run pfBlocker, or in this case, pfBlocker. So let's take a look. Now, remember this is under packages, and we installed it. So you can see I'm already up and running. Everything looks good. So we'll go over the first page here under general settings. So we're going to enable it. All this rest of this is automatically set the way it is exactly. I didn't change any of the rest of this. So we go down here. Here's what I did change. The rule order. Default rule order is pfBlocker blocks and rejects, and then all other rules get processed. I changed the rule order to pf pass match, pf block, then pfSense is pass and match, and then pfSense is pass and block. And the reason why this works, the way this works, the firewall does whatever's first. So whatever is at the top of the list has the highest priority. So if I tell it to pass to port 609, and then underneath that rule I put another rule to block port 609, because it first found 609 as a rule to pass, it ignores the second rule. I can have a bunch of lists of IP addresses that I want it to always allow, and it loads that first. Then underneath of that is a list of things I want it to block. Now if an IP address comes up that I've already said is okay on the block list, since I matched it or I allowed it first, pfSense firewall will not block it. So that's why this is important, and this is what works best for me. So after we set our settings like that, we'll hit save. Okay, now this is where things get interesting. So now we create a list. So you would click add, and you'll see here it comes up all your settings. So you can pick a name, you can give it a description, this is all based on you, and then list. Well, where do we get the list from? So I get my list from iblocklist.com. They have a few that are free, and they also have some that require membership. So real quick, we'll go in and look at my list. So we'll go in here and we'll edit this list. This is my whitelist. This is my list that I have loaded first. So anything that's on this list, it allows. So I have here Microsoft, which is for like Windows updates and for the Windows Store, that kind of stuff. And then I have here what's called good, and this is actually good peers. There's a list called good peers. Okay, then I have Amazon. We are a Plex household, so gotta have that. Steam, Blizzard, Ubisoft, Nintendo, Activision, Sony, Electronic Arts, Square Enix, NCSoft. If you don't know what NCSoft is, that's Guild Wars and a few other games. Pandora. So, and then under here you have your list action. So it's asking you, what do you want to do with this list? What is this list for? We're going to permit it, which means we're going to allow. How often do you want to update? You really only need to do it once a day, and in fact, if you don't have a subscription, you're only allowed to do it once a day. I have mine every 6 hours, and you can get into more detail. Like if you have it once a week, you can select what day. Logging is automatically enabled. If you're only using one computer to download your games, or you only have one thing, you know, and you have a bunch of cell phones, but you have one computer that you download games or Steam or whatever, you could put the port in here, just like with the alias like we talked about. You could put the port in here for what you download your torrents on. However, there's multiple computers in my house, and I don't want somebody downloading something that they shouldn't and then me getting in trouble for it. So what I have is I have an alias called NotBlocker in my ports that actually covers every single port except for the most common ones. For instance, it doesn't HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, and I think I also have it avoid my Plex. So now these lists will not apply to the ports that I did not include in this list. So now every port except for the ones that I did not include into NotBlocker's alias will be covered by this rule. And I did that for both inbound and outbound. Okay? Now let's go back and we can look at the block list. Again, name it whatever you want. You can see here I have anti, which is anti-BitTorrenting. So this would be like my ISP trying to figure out whether I'm BitTorrenting or not so that they can throttle me. Level 1, I think you can get level 1 for free, and it's just like known bad peers, known bad shared. Hijacked, which is reported hijacked websites or IP addresses, and then bad peers. This covers a lot of people that are fake or a lot of shares that are fake. So under list action, I have denied both, so it's going to deny both inbound and outbound. Again, so every 6 hours the update. And then I also applied the same rule, destination port. So it only applies to those ports that I have in that list for both inbound and outbound. Okay, so that's that. That's how pfBlocker works. And that's really all you need. Once you apply everything and get everything set, you're going to go over here to update, and then click on reload, and then run it. And what this is going to do is it's going to download all of those lists and reapply them to the firewall and make sure everything's running correctly within that within those parameters. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you the not block alias and what ports are covered. You can so not blocker. So this blocker to the ports listed. So any port that's not listed is not covered under that. So for instance, 1 through 20 is the beginning of the TCP protocol ports to the one right before FTP. So every port from 1 right until 20, which 21 is FTP, is blocked. And then we do the same exact thing after 21, so we start at 22, we go all the way to HTTP and we block it. And then you can see I do that again with HTTPS, very common tracker, and then we do from the end of Plex to the end of the protocol. So what that does is that literally makes that pfBlocker rule apply to every single port except for HTTP, HTTP, HTTPS, which is your web, the 2 tracker ports, MyPlex, and okay. So here's something interesting. This should keep Plex in the clear as far as port forwarding goes. Well, if I show you the rules here, you'll see that the port forwarding we set up in NAT created these 2 rules here for Plex and the torrent. The problem is that, like I told you before, whatever comes first on the list gets applied, and then whatever is after it is has lower priority, so it does not get applied. So, for instance, if there's an IP address that's in the whitelist, it's also in the blacklist, it won't get blocked because it's already in the whitelist. That being said, the blacklist or the block list comes before Plex and before the torrent. Now with Plex, I have it to avoid that port altogether, so it shouldn't be a problem. And with the torrent, this is actually good because what it means is that everything's being allowed first. Whatever's not allowed is then getting blocked by the block list, and then the torrent is allowed to connect. It's forwarding the port, but only for the IPs that are in the whitelist. So anything that's in the blacklist doesn't get forwarded, so that protects me. Now, how do you apply a rule? Because this rule automatically generates right here. No matter what you can move this up here and change the order all you want. You hit save, reload. Next time it actually applies, or next time pfBlocker updates, it's automatically going to put itself back at the top. And like things for like Plex or any other port forward that you want to avoid these lists is going to get kicked under. Therefore, if like say like StarCraft's website is 192.168.168.168 or whatever it is, it's automatically going to block that, even though it's here in the list. What you do is you go to floating. Floating applies before the regular rules. And again, anything that comes first is what gets applied. Anything after that is secondary. So you can see I actually put Plex in here to make sure it does not get blocked. How you do that is you just mimic the settings. So we want to allow it to pass through the firewall. It's going to be connecting to WAN, right? Because this is for Plex out in the world. TCP, UDP, again, like we said earlier. Source would be so The source is like, where is it coming from the WAN? Where out in the world? Any WAN address that I might be on, whether it's on my cell phone, whether I'm at work, whether it's my fiance's cell phone, whether I'm using my grandparents' computer when I'm visiting them, whatever. So I want to allow any source. And then the destination. Where is it on my network? Where is this source? Where am I connecting to? Mine is 10.10.10.252, which is the same exact setting as NAT. You choose your ports, which are Plex for me, because that's what I named it. And you click Save. Now, if you have problems with this not applying or not working like it's supposed to, you can check Apply Action immediately on Match. So what that does is it'll make sure that it gets applied as soon as it sees it versus loading the whole firewall. I guess you could kind of think of it like as it's forcing this rule to get loaded first. Okay, so we'll go back to rules, and I'll show you something else that I experimented with. So we have a 5-year-old, and as I said previously, we have Amazon Prime household. Every TV is hooked up with a Fire Stick or a Fire TV. So the problem is that when it's time for him to go to bed, he goes in his room, turns his TV on, he's up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then has to get up to go to school in the morning, doesn't like to wake up. So we have time zones set in. Now, Amazon allows us to put parental controls on, but charges us for the use of time limits. And honestly, the time limits are not very clear. So what I set up in floating, because remember, whatever happens first is what gets put into priority. Even if his IP address was allowed to connect to the internet somewhere else in the firewall, this rule comes first, so he is not allowed to connect. So we'll go through that setting real quick. This is good for parental controls, or if you have something you want to take offline. Say you have like a good example would be like if you have a server that opens up and becomes a pretty much a dump or a backup for everything, but you don't want it to connect to the internet at that time and period. If you select just WAN here, it wouldn't be able to connect to the internet during the period that it's backing up or offloading or whatever it's doing. For him, I don't want him to be able to connect to our local Plex server, because again, he'll be up all night watching TV. Local will be LAN. I also don't want him connecting to Amazon Prime or YouTube and then being able to watch YouTube all night either, which would be the wide area network or WAN. So the action in this rule is to block. We're going to apply this immediately. I don't know if it's because I had both of them selected, but I needed to check this to enable it to work with the LAN. It only worked WAN otherwise. So any protocol, pretty sure that Amazon doesn't use anything fancy. They just use TCP for simplicity. Any protocol, the source. So where is the connection coming from? It's coming from his device. So we want to select single host or alias. We're going to put in his IP address, and then it's going. Where is it going? Any connection, whether it's on my LAN, WAN, anywhere, YouTube, Amazon, server here at the house, anywhere. Okay. And then you save it, and now, and when you do that, now he cannot connect at all. So we need a schedule, right? We need to make it so he can only connect during certain times. That's right here where the schedule comes in, called James TV. And once you create a schedule, it'll automatically show up in here. So now I'll show you how to create the schedule. We'll go to Firewall, we'll go to Schedules. You can see the one I already have here created. To show you how this works, I'll just add a new one. So we're going to call this schedule test. You can name it whatever description you want. We'll be like no TV for you. Alright. So here you can actually choose it to only work at certain months, which is interesting, but generally for our purposes, it's school nights. There's a little bit of a quirk in the time here, because you can't go backwards. And by backwards, I mean you can't set, okay, I wanted the TV block or the rule, I want it to start at 10 a.m. in the morning, but I want it to stop at 8 a.m. the next morning. Or this does not work because it doesn't know the next day. It doesn't have a prerequisite for the next day. So the way we do this, in order to get it to go to that time zone, it ends at midnight. That's it. The end of the day is midnight. You can't continue into the next day. So, and this will make more sense when I show you here in a minute. So, on Sunday nights, Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, and Thursday nights, he has school the next morning. So I want his TV to turn off, we'll say, at 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock, that's 21 in military time, 00. And then how long do we want this to go for? Well, the highest we can go is 23:59, which would be 11:59 in the morning. Or at night, midnight, pretty much. So we'll save that as school night, or as S nights. Okay, that's for school nights. Then we're going to add it. Okay, so now we've added it. Okay, but what about from midnight until, say, 6:30 in the morning? So every day is fine to have the TV off from midnight till 6 in the morning. There's no reason the TV's on from 6 in the morning. I mean, from midnight to 6 in the morning. So for every day, we're going to start at 0:00, which is exactly midnight. So this ended at 11:59. This is exactly midnight. And it's going to go, this rule is going to be on until 6 in the morning. So now every day, from midnight till 6 in the morning, this rule applies. Okay, so now let's see what we have. Monday through Thursday, and including Sunday, at 9 p.m., TV turns off and stays off until 11:59. Every day of the week, from midnight till 6 a.m., the TV's off. Okay, so we could leave that and we would be done. And then on Friday and Saturday nights, the TV would stay on until midnight. So let's set the weekends on a shutoff time that's a little earlier than midnight. So on Friday and Saturday nights, we're going to have the TV turn off at, we'll say 10:30. Okay? And they will stay off until midnight. Okay, so the way that translates, if you think about it, is Monday through Thursday and Sunday, TV turns off at 9, stays off till 6 in the morning. On Friday and Saturday, TV turns off at 10:30, stays off till 6 in the morning. And that's the rule. And you can delete, edit, change, rename, however you want.